This is the story of the events that launched our modern-day animal rescue movement. Cultures around the world have wrestled for thousands of years with questions surrounding what rights animals inherently do or should have, and what is humanity's role and responsibility in caring for and avoiding harm to animals. Early Eastern and Western philosophies in ancient India and ancient Greece debated the divine nature of animals, their capacity for conscious thought, and whether we should respect animals because humans might even be reincarnated into them one day. But what you see around you as modern-day animal rescue efforts originated a little more recently, about 200 years ago to be exact. And you'll never believe which animal was at the center of the first known criminal conviction for an animal welfare case. Stick around for the answer and to learn alongside me about the history of animal rescue efforts as you know them in our first episode of Changemaker Cafe Animal Rescue Series. You can download our series action guide for resources and tips to tackle these issues in your community, whether you're aiming to start a nonprofit or socially conscious business, serve as a volunteer or board member, raise funds or awareness, and more at changemakercafe.com. Thank you to Click and Pledge for sponsoring this series. Ready? Let's get curious. Warning. Watching Changemaker Cafe may lead to side effects such as caring a lot, an insatiable desire to help others, growing your skills to change the world, or becoming a leader in your community. For best results, use an open mind and share with all your friends. The year was 1822. The place, London, England. In a courtroom in the city, a resentful man by the name of Bill Burns scoffed just as prosecutor Richard Martin led his victim into the court by the reins. It was a donkey, horribly beaten, blood and visible injuries covering its body. The evidence of Mr. Burns's harm was clear to all who looked upon the creature. But this was a time when abuse to animals of all sorts, cattle, dogs, bears, and even monkeys, was commonplace in the streets. So all of London was asking, would Mr. Burns face any consequences for his actions? The rights of animals had been debated for centuries, but something was different now. You see, just before this trial, Mr. Burns's prosecutor, Richard Martin, finally managed to pass his ill treatment of horses and cattle bill, also known as Martin's Act, after being met with ridicule and resistance for a year. Martin's Act would become the world's first major law designed to protect animals from cruelty and harm and would give some teeth, pun intended, to later efforts by animal welfare advocates to ensure there were consequences for abusing animals. As for Bill Burns, he was convicted and made to pay a fine for his punishment. Despite the meager result, though, his case had an impact. It would become the tragedy that launched a movement. Perhaps inspired by Martin's Act, courts in New York labeled cruelty to animals a misdemeanor in 1822. Efforts back in England around the same time eventually culminated in a more robust Cruelty to Animals Act passed in 1835, which outlawed dogfighting, baiting, and other forms of cruelty. France introduced their own legislation in 1850, and Washington, New York, California, and Florida added more laws to their books in the decades after. But activists at the time observed that just having laws on the books didn't necessarily mean that they were being enforced or that people's attitudes towards cruelty to animals were changing. So social good organizations, nonprofits, were soon formed to further this message and mission. In 1824, the first Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA, was founded in England, focusing on issues such as the mistreatment of carriage horses. The effort arrived in the U.S. in 1866 with the launch of the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in New York City. And the Women's SPCA of Pennsylvania opened the nation's first official animal shelter in 1869. In the late 1870s, cultural attitudes towards the treatment of animals started to shift. How do we know? A famous book was published. You might have heard of it. Black Beauty was published by author Anna Sewell in 1877 and tells the story of harsh working conditions for horses of the 19th century from the point of view of the horse, Black Beauty himself. I had to read this in school as a kid. Did you? I'm curious. What did you think? Now, looking back, modern-day novelist Jane Smiley would explain how Black Beauty helped shift perspectives on animal welfare, saying, as soon as you say that an animal has a point of view, it's very difficult to just go and be cruel to that animal. The kind of animal rescue work we're familiar with now started to really take shape in the late 20th century. For example, Best Friends Animal Society, founded in the 1980s, played a pivotal role in promoting animal adoptions. And while animal rights and rescue work looks a lot different today than it did back then, the world faces a number of different challenges in this work now. We examine the history of social problems in Changemaker Cafe because the context of where we've been can help us understand one of our most important questions. What do we do now? To answer that, we need to fast forward and take a look at the challenges animal rescue work is facing today. We'll be talking primarily about animal rescue efforts connected to companion animals in this video series, which are defined by the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals as domesticated or domestic bred animals whose physical, emotional, behavioral, and social needs can be readily met as the companions in a home or in close daily relationship with humans. So we're talking dogs, cats, horses, rabbits, ferrets, birds, guinea pigs, and select other mammals, small reptiles, and fish. Now, with that definition in the back of our mind, let's see if we can wrap our brains around just how big the need is. Estimating the exact number of homeless pets is a challenge because they may be hard to find. But experts do know that the number of companion animals without homes, food, or access to their basic needs has grown over the past years, exacerbated by economic challenges which have made animal care more costly. One study looked at pet homelessness across 20 different countries and estimated that 362 million dogs and cats, or roughly 1 in 3 pets, were homeless across those countries. In the United States specifically, the Humane Society puts projections at about 70 million stray pets. If pets were people, that would be roughly the population of France. These animals living without homes can be prone to serious illness, injury, or abuse. And of that 70 million, only an estimated 5 to 7 million, or less than 10%, wind up in one of the nation's 3,500 shelters, more than 60% of which are no-kill shelters. Shelters make a big impact, but due to extremely limited resources and a number of other factors, which we'll cover more deeply in upcoming videos in this series, being in a shelter doesn't automatically mean salvation for every animal. Once in the shelter, the ASPCA estimates that roughly 2/3 of those pets are adopted, but 13% of dogs and 17% of cats are euthanized each year. It is a lot. It can feel overwhelming, especially for people on the ground doing this work every day. But here's the good news. There are good people out there like you trying to help. Today's animal rescue ecosystem includes numerous nonprofits, government organizations, and individual changemakers on the ground. There's no shortage of work that needs to be done to help these animals. Did you start watching this series wondering what role you might play as a changemaker in animal rescue work? Let's get you some inspiration by hearing about some of the types of community organizations and people that make up the animal rescue ecosystem. And to do that, we're going to meet our first subject matter expert of the series. I traveled to Indianapolis, Indiana, to sit down with Kelly Diamond, director at Indianapolis Animal Care Services, to learn more about animal rescue work and these important roles that people play.
All right, let's break this down. You've got an ecosystem in every social issue of stakeholders and people and professionals who are working to make an impact in that area. So when it comes to animal rescue, who are those players?
It's pretty much everyone that exists in the world. Your legislature body, your politicians, your actual people working in these shelters and the people working in the rescues, the volunteers, the staff. A huge part of that as well, including the medical community that's maybe not specifically involved in animal sheltering, our veterinarians, our medical clinics. Also, and you can't forget, probably one of the most important components would be the community. The citizens that are out there, hopefully adopting animals, caring for the animals, and keeping them in their homes. And they just play just as huge a part in this as everyone else does.
Speaking of which, this is the perfect segue for our first Changemaker Challenge of the series, where we take a moment to reflect on what we're learning and brainstorm ideas to make an impact. Here's what I want you to do. Take a few seconds to think about your unique talents and interests as a changemaker. Maybe you're a great event planner, or a public speaker, or you're good at math or art. What role can you most see yourself playing in animal rescue efforts? I'd love to hear about it. Share in the comments below. What a journey, and we're only on the first video. In our next video in our animal rescue series, we'll take a deeper look at one of the major challenges of animal rescue efforts, pet overpopulation. We'll examine some of the underlying causes of pet overpopulation and start thinking through what can we do to improve the lives of the millions of animals living in and out of the shelters. I can't wait for you to hear more from Kelly and other subject matter experts in upcoming videos in this series. There's just one last thing to share with you. A sincere thank you to our sponsor making this series possible, Click and Pledge. Click and Pledge is a comprehensive fundraising platform for nonprofits ready to raise money and grow. Their robust fundraising features include donation forms, in-person fundraising, text to give, peer-to-peer fundraising that allows supporters to raise money by forming teams in their networks, video fundraising with donation links embedded directly in your videos, donor outreach tools to improve donor retention, a complete Salesforce integration, and many other integrations, and more. Some platforms charge more based on your organization's size or the size of your donor list, not Click and Pledge, where the pricing stays the same even as your donor list increases. There are no contracts, and all of their solutions are included at no extra cost. Learn more about Click and Pledge's fundraising solutions, and you can get your first month free using the links below this video. You can get in contact with their team to ask questions or schedule a demo or sign up to give it a try right now. Find the links for both below. See you for the next episode of Changemaker Cafe.